All right. Welcome to the healthiest half hour ish anywhere on the internet today. Hi, this is the Exam Room Live, and I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thanks so much for joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. We hope you had a lovely Mother's Day weekend, relaxing and filled with love. Big show on tap today, as always. But let's start here. New research looking at whether summertime will slow the spread of the coronavirus has been released, and plant-based meats are a hit as people look to clean up their health where COVID-19 began, and a famed Olympian is going plant-based. Lots to talk about today. Those headlines, plus Dr. Neal Barnard is with us today, fresh off of presentations at the big online plant-based immersion over the weekend. Dr. Barnard, I trust all went well with the immersion, right?
It was fantastic. It was all online due to current circumstances. So smooth, a huge participation, and everyone had a great time.
Looking forward to hearing more about that. And also with us today is Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, also known as the Gut Health MD. We are going to be taking your questions all about gut microbiome and COVID-19. Dr. B, so pumped to have you on the show with us today.
Chuck, I'm pumped anytime I get to jump on a call with you, my friend, and I'm happy to be here with the PCRM talking to the wonderful people here with the podcast.
You're a good man. So if you have a question for Dr. Barnard or Dr. B, go ahead and post that in the comment section right now. We will get to as many as we can by the end of the show. That's going to get confusing, Dr. B and Dr. Barnard. So Dr. Barnard and Dr. Bulsiewicz, how about that? We'll just keep it discreet like that. But if you have a question about the gut microbiome, COVID-19, your health, you name it, post that in the comment section right now, and we will get to as many as we can by the end of the show. But we start today with the headlines and 5 things that you need to know for Monday, May the 11th, 2020. And we do start with a spot of good news as Sunday saw the lowest number of confirmed COVID-19 related deaths in the U.S. in more than a month. Officials caution, though, that the numbers are often down on the weekend before spiking again during the week. Meanwhile, though, a troubling trend in some countries where social distancing guidelines are beginning to be relaxed. South Korea now delaying reopening of schools after a rash of new cases were reported. Likewise, with nightclubs and restaurants that have been reopened, they now, too, are ordering to be reshut. And similarly, health officials in India say the country had the largest ever increase in cases just today. And taking a look at the tally board, there are now 4.1 million cases globally, with 1.3 million of them right here in the U.S., where the death toll is expected to surpass 80,000 any day now. New research out of Canada shows geographic location and temperature play little to no role in slowing the spread of the coronavirus. That conclusion comes after Toronto scientists compared the rate of outbreaks to the climate and latitude in nearly 150 areas around the world. The findings also show humidity has only a mild effect in reducing transmission. A co-author and epidemiologist Dion Jesnick concludes that, quote, summer is not going to make this go away. The study of more than 375,000 cases also finds the most effective way of slowing the spread is continued social distancing and closures. In other news, it seems KFC's test of plant-based nuggets in China during the coronavirus pandemic was a success. The company that makes the nuggets for the restaurant chain says it's now planning to bring a whole line of products to store shelves under the name of Plant Ever. Consumers can expect to find the new options beginning in June. And the plant-based protein market in China, by the way, expected to swell to a $12 billion industry within the next 3 years. And from the Look Who's Eating Plant-Based Now file, Olympic gymnast Ali Raceman is making big changes to her diet, eating nearly exclusively vegan. The gold medalist tells Women's Health that the change has been calming for her. And she's been busy in the kitchen, too, whipping up lots of soups. That's her favorite, apparently, including a broccoli and spirulina recipe of her own creation. And her real go-to for dinner? Well, it's heavy on veggies and usually is oven-roasted potatoes with cucumbers and roasted Brussels sprouts. For dessert, she says she loves ice cream, frozen bananas, and dairy-free chocolate chips with just a splash of soy milk. That does sound good. Who doesn't like that? Nice cream. Can't argue with that. And we have heard how the coronavirus has exacted a severe toll on meat plants here in the U.S. But the problem, however, appears to be on a global level. Officials in Ghana say a single worker at a fish processing factory there infected 533 other employees. That number represents more than 10% of all confirmed cases in the West African country. And I want to welcome Dr. Barnard back to the show now. Dr. Barnard, you hear about this, and that sounds eerily similar to the problems that have been facing plants here in the U.S. One plant, 10% of the entire country's outbreak. That's staggering.
Yeah, it sure is. And we've seen this with pork plants. We've seen it with beef plants. Now with fish, places selling fish. Poultry operations have been hugely hit. That's historically been a big issue because they have had many pathogens out of poultry plants. People are kind of used to that. The new situation is so many slaughter workers are not able to process the chicken because they're out sick. So the chickens are being killed in the houses where they are raised and just dumped in a landfill. So it's really changing the whole meat world. I got a whole new thing that I need to share with you though, Chuck. Some new statistics out of DC. Can I share my screen with you?
By all means, let's do it.
Okay. Let me see now. Where are we? Hope I got this right. Okay. There, we got that.
We've still got your face, which is looking good today.
You're not seeing my PowerPoint, is that right?
No, not at the moment. Not at the moment.
That means I shared the wrong thing. That's a fine. Well, I'm glad you let me know. Let me stop sharing, and we're going to try again. We learn as we go, Chuck.
It's a technology thing, you know?
Here we are. Now tell me you've got that. Still no dice?
Okay.
Are you seeing my PowerPoint now?
No.
No. What is?
Oh, wait. Yes. As a matter of fact.
Is this a Monday or what?
I mean, this technology, your computer definitely has a case of the Mondays. There is no question about that.
Okay. Do you see our Physicians Committee logo?
I do. I think we're ready to rock and roll, my friend.
Okay. Here's what I want to share with you. Do you see the words Washington, D.C. on the top of your screen?
Indeed, I do, with the date.
All right. That was Saturday. There were 12 new deaths. In Washington, D.C., like every city, we track who's getting sick and who's dying. There were 12 deaths in Washington, D.C. That's terrible, obviously. But I have to say that's been a daily occurrence. What got many of our attention, though, was look at the sex breakdown. There were 9 men, 3 women. We thought, what is that about? And then when you look back day by day, you see that's been the pattern all along, that men are outnumbering women when they get this virus with regard to who lives and who dies. The men do really badly. Raising the question, is COVID-19 sexist? If you look back at the very beginning in China, the death rates, 2.8% in men, 1.7% in women. Then in Italy, as you know, Italy was very hard hit. The numbers were overall higher, but in men, it was still substantially higher compared to women, 7% versus 4%. And then in New York, early on in the United States, these gender numbers were really not tracked, but they started to get tracked, and men started outnumbering women more and more. Okay, new study just came out and said, we think we know what this is about. Let me see if I can share this with you. Okay. Bring this back up again. Okay, so here's what we think it is. Are you able to see this diagram? Over on the right, that is a human cell. That could be a lung cell, it could be other cells of the body. And those yellow forks that stick out that say ACE2, that's the angiotensin converting enzyme number 2. That is the welcome mat where the virus attaches. See that spiky circle? That's the virus. It attaches to that fork, it gets sucked into the cell where it can then reproduce and then spew out later. Here's what researchers just reported, brand new. Men's bodies. make more of that ACE2 enzyme. They're throwing out more welcome mats. And so we think, okay, what do I do? There's nothing you can really do about that, obviously. Men simply make more of them. Or is there something we can do? Well, you may remember a few days ago, we were talking about obesity. Fat cells make that very same ACE2 receptor. And if you reduce body fat, you have fewer, each fat cell is smaller, the surface of it is smaller, and we believe that reduces the number of ACE2 enzymes. On the other hand, if you gain weight, you're going to have more. Okay, so men are at higher risk than women, but a man who loses weight and is at a healthy body weight is at dramatically less risk than a man who is overweight. So we can't eliminate the sex difference here, but we can reduce our risk dramatically. Losing weight, along with dealing with blood pressure, dealing with diabetes, all those things are going to help. So there you have it. Back to you, Chuck.
That's very interesting to me. And it really seems like we do have more control over our own health than so many people realize. Again, one of the things that I've learned in doing this show for the past 2.5 years with you is that it doesn't have to be genetics. Just because your family had heart disease doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have it. Just because your family is obese doesn't mean you need to be obese. We can really take control of our own health, and that starts by really honing in and making sure that we're eating a healthy diet.
Genes do play a big role in many things, but I think it's very often overstated. Genes affect your eye color, your hair color, that kind of thing. But on the other hand, many disease genes are more suggestions rather than actual orders. And you can change that to a great degree. I'm just thinking about diabetes. There are genes that increase the risk of diabetes. But if you look at diabetes that goes all up and down a family tree, that could also be recipes or food habits that we pass down along with genes. We've seen that with high blood pressure. We've even seen it with cancer. This will be surprising. Researchers found that there are genes for lung cancer, but the way that these particular genes work is that they make it harder for the body to eliminate inhaled carcinogens. So let's say I'm smoking. If I happen to have this gene and I can't get rid of the carcinogens I've inhaled, I'm at much higher risk for lung cancer. But what if I just decide I'm not going to smoke? Then that gene is taken out of the picture. So there are genes that affect many aspects of our health, but if we have a healthy diet and lifestyle, those genes can be irrelevant. So as I was mentioning, men have more of those ACE2 enzymes, but let's say a man loses weight and he's in a healthy body weight, he's got a good BMI, he has reduced his risk regardless of those genetic influences.
Outstanding. I love to hear that. I love to know the fact that we have, power over this. I enjoy knowing that we can do our part to keep ourselves as healthy as possible and not chalk everything up to fate per se.
It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. It's not perfect. We still wash our hands. You still do social distancing. You still wear a mask, all that stuff. You don't want to get infected. We don't want to get cocky about it. However, the most important thing after we've done everything we can to avoid getting infected is deal with all those underlying conditions: obesity, hypertension, diabetes, lung diseases, heart disease. And we have so much more control over those than we used to have. And it starts with diet.
Indeed, and those all are the top comorbidities. Dr. Barnard, stick around because it is time to open up the doctor's mailbag where we answer your questions. And as always, if you have one, go ahead and post it in the comments section now, or you can find us on Twitter or Instagram at Chuck Carroll, WLC, at PCRM on Twitter, and at Physicians Committee on Instagram. Just make sure that you use that hashtag Exam Room Podcast. And Dr. Barnard, today's question comes to us from True on YouTube. They write, is it okay to be on a plant-based diet if you have iron deficiency? And maybe that question is because they're worried about not getting enough iron themselves, and their doctor has told them perhaps they need to get iron from meat. What is the truth about iron deficiency in plant-based diets?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for asking that question. It's a really common question. In part, that's sort of the fault of marketing. Ever since the 1950s, people have talked about you need iron. If you have iron-poor blood, you'll be sluggish. If you're old enough to remember those old Geritol ads, they would talk about taking their potion that had more iron than a whole pound of calf's liver. And then on the heels of that, people thought, well, red meat, great source of iron, so have more of it. However, we've also learned that iron is like so many other elements. You do need a certain amount, but you also want to avoid an overdose, because if you have extra iron, that's linked to a higher risk of both heart disease and Alzheimer's disease. That's right. Too much iron is linked to Alzheimer's disease in a lot of really very good research studies, and people are now limiting iron for that reason. That's the reason if you bought a Centrum Silver, those multivitamins for people over 50, they leave the iron out of it completely. Okay, so what's the answer? If you're concerned about low iron, the first thing is see your doctor and figure out what's going on. See if you really are low in iron. If you're thinking you're low in iron because you're tired, well, there's a lot of reasons to be tired other than being low in iron. Most tired people are not low in iron, but your doctor can easily test. It's very simple to do. If you are low in iron, the first thing your doctor will do is try to figure out why. Starting with, are you bleeding? And the doctor is going to talk to you about, have you had rectal bleeding? Have you had a colonoscopy recently? Where is this blood flow coming from? So once that's sorted, if the issue really is you're not getting enough iron in your diet, meat is the last place you want to go. It does have iron in it, and a fair amount of it. In fact, it can drive you into iron overload. That's, as we've been saying, a dangerous condition to be in too. What's the answer? Green leafy vegetables, I have to say, because cows and pigs and chickens, they don't make iron in their bodies. The iron they've got came from things that they eat. So if a cow is eating grass, the iron in the grass goes into the cow's body. Hopefully you're not eating grass, but if you're eating your green leafy vegetables, broccoli, kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, all the greens, they have lots of iron in it. And the beauty of it is it's in a form called non-heme iron, which means it's more absorbable if you need it and less absorbable if you already have lots of iron on board. So there you go. Talk to your doctor, figure out your iron situation. If you need more iron in your diet, greens are the best. Beans come in second. So enjoy.
So your body actually regulates whether the absorption level based off of its current iron levels within the system already. That's pretty fascinating.
It really shows us that non-heme iron, this is the iron that's in plant foods. It's the kind our bodies evolved with, if I can put it that way. At the risk of sounding controversial, human beings really are pretty much herbivorous by nature, like our chimpanzee and gorilla and orangutan cousins. And so if you're evolving with those foods, we evolved the capacity to extract more iron from plant foods if our body was low in iron. And when our body senses, no, I've got enough iron already, your body stops absorbing so much. But with regard to the heme iron in animals, we don't regulate that very well. It just comes into your party without being invited, and that risks iron overload and a lot of problems you don't want to have.
All right, Dr. Barnard, I appreciate the iron wisdom. I appreciate that. That's fascinating. Okay. We're not quite ready to close up the doctor's mailbag just yet because we're about to get into the nitty gritty of the gut. So if you have a gut related question, go ahead and post it now. I know some of the most popular episodes we've ever done of the Exam Room podcast have been all about gut bacteria. So I suspect quite a few of you might be curious about that. So my next guest is somebody who knows an awful lot about that because so much of our body's overall health does begin right there. From our brain to our toes, your belly can be your immune system's best friend, or it can lead to a health disaster. And that is something especially important to focus on right now during this pandemic. And so to elaborate on all of that and the foods that we should be eating to keep the gut in tip-top shape, we welcome to the program the author of the new book, Fiber Fueled. He is known as the Gut Health MD. This is Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. Dr. Bulsiewicz, welcome to the show.
Chuck, thank you for having me on, my friend. It's an honor to be here and talking to the PCRM community. And, Chuck, I just want to say something real quick. I was sitting backstage listening to Dr. Barnard break down the ACE2 receptor and the different connections of comorbidities to the risk of COVID-19, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, obesity. And it's no coincidence that every single one of these conditions that Dr. Barnard was referring to are connected back to our gut microbiome. It is no coincidence. And it also happens to be the case that this past week, there was actually a study out of China, admittedly not peer-reviewed. We're waiting to see the peer review of the study. But there was a study out of China suggesting that the gut microbiome may be one of the critical pieces in terms of identifying who is likely to develop severe COVID-19 versus otherwise. And so I feel like it's one of these examples, that you and I have talked about how the gut episodes of the Exam Room podcast have been very popular. And one of the reasons why they're so popular is because this is one of the places where health all starts to come together and it starts to make sense. It's in the gut.
And I believe that when you and I last spoke on the audio version of the podcast, you dropped a huge nugget of information on us. And that was something about 70% of your immune system's performance, like it resides right there in the gut, right? 70%.
Yeah, so the gut associated lymphoid tissue is actually 70% of the immune system. And that resides within the gut. Literally, there is a single layer of cells that is so thin that the human eye cannot detect it, called the epithelial layer. And on one side of the cell, on one side of that layer of cells, is 70% of your immune system. And on the other layer, on the other side, is your microbiome, 39 trillion microbes. And they're so close to each other. It's not just physical proximity. They're in constant communication with each other. There's ways that they talk to each other. And one of the things that I detail in my book, Fiber Fueled, in great detail, is the connection using short chain fatty acids. The short chain fatty acids, which come from fiber, are one of the ways that we can optimize our immune system and help to build our defenses against COVID-19. But Chuck, it's also not a coincidence that short chain fatty acids also help us to regulate our metabolism, to control our appetite, to not overeat, to control our weight, to balance our cholesterol. They've been connected to protecting us from heart disease. They protect us from cancer. I mean, you just go down the line. It's incredible how powerful these things are. And we waste so much energy and conversation on lectins and anti-nutrients when we should be instead of running towards the food that heals, and that is fiber, which you will find exclusively in a plant-based diet.
Well, you mentioned food. That's the big one. I think that everybody watching this at heart, they are a nutrition foodie. So let's talk about first the foods that we should really be avoiding right now. What are the ones that should be big time no-nos?
It's so easy. It's so obvious, honestly. I think we all know it to be true that processed foods are not good for us. And the more that we dig into it on the microbiome side, the more that we discover that perverting our food, processing it, adding chemicals, additives, preservatives, it doesn't do us any good. You take healthy food and you turn it into something that's not healthy. And so it's in our best interest to eliminate these processed foods. I mean, in a perfect world, completely, entirely. And then further, look at saturated fat, which we find in animal products, when you find it in meat, dairy, eggs. And yet we have study after study demonstrating to us that saturated fat causes damage to the gut microbiome, causes dysbiosis, and even increases bile release. The fat causes bile release, and your microbiome adapts to the bile release, creating secondary bile salts that are connected to colon cancer. So the bottom line is that the path towards a healthier gut is very clear. It's through fiber from a diverse mix of foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, seeds, nuts, legumes. That's what we need. And when we go, 90% the other direction, which is what the average American is doing, 90% the other direction, we're destroying our body. We're destroying our gut.
So you mentioned saturated fat. What about plant sources of saturated fat? Are they as detrimental as the ones you were talking about?
Yeah, to be fair, there are concerns that exist with both coconut oil and with palm oil or coconut products, period. So for example, when I go to Starbucks, I like the way that a coconut milk latte tastes. It doesn't mean it's good for my gut.
Gotcha. If you have a question for Dr. B, go ahead and post it in the comment section now. I see a ton of them are already kind of filling up the comment section there. You mentioned just kind of in general fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, but are there some specific ones that you can throw out there that might be a little bit more beneficial than others?
Well, the way I like to say it is this. I think that you should have as many friends as humanly possible. Every single plant, every single species or type of plant is your friend. But that's okay to have best friends too. And you can make the superfoods your best friends. And to me, in my book, I have an acronym for it. F goals, fruit and fermented, greens and whole grains, omega super seeds like flax, chia, hemp, aromatics like garlic, onions, shallots, legumes, shrooms, seaweed. And then if you're asking me, Dr. B, you only get one choice. Okay, here it is. Broccoli sprouts, sulforaphane. It's amazing the synergy between sulforaphane, which is a cancer crushing phytochemical, and the way it can optimize our body when it synergizes with short chain fatty acids from fiber.
All right, questions are rolling in. Let's take one from Caden on Facebook. He writes, can COVID-19 or the treatment of it have a harmful effect on the gut microbiome?
You know, there are preliminary studies. So I alluded already to the preliminary study out of China that suggests that your gut microbiome may predict who is at risk for severe COVID-19. There are also preliminary small studies, again, out of China that showed a difference in the gut microbiome in people who were hospitalized with COVID-19. The answer to the question is we don't know enough yet for me to give a very direct answer, but I think it would come as no surprise recognizing that about 50% of patients may present with GI symptoms, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and the heavy presence of the ACE2 receptor in the gut, which, by the way, is also connected to the gut microbiome. These things all suggest that the development of the COVID-19 virus or infection would in fact have an effect on the gut microbiome.
Next question comes to us from Leslie on Facebook. She writes, Leslie's question just popped off of my screen. Hold on. She writes, I just had to take a round of antibiotics and wonder what's the best way to repopulate my gut with healthy bacteria.
Well, the best way to repopulate your gut is actually not to take a probiotic. We have a study out of Israel, September 2018, that showed that actually slows down the recovery of your gut microbiome. The best approach is a plant-based diet. The best approach is to take your gut microbes as they currently exist and restore them. So as opposed to introducing new bacteria that are foreign to your microbiome, take the gut microbiome that you currently have and elevate it and bring it back. And the way that we elevate it, the way that we bring it back is by feeding it. When you nourish it with a diverse mix of plant fibers, you'll get your gut back, and it will happen in 4 weeks or less.
There you go. JS on YouTube. What do you think of kombucha?
I think kombucha is great, but it's so hyped up. This is not the solution to healing your entire gut in one swift move. I mean, I wish that I could say that it was. Let me put it to you this way. Nutrition is all about substitutions. And so if you take soda or some sort of sugar-rich beverage and you instead replace it with some kombucha, I think you've taken a step in the right direction. But you know what I would say is even better than kombucha? It's free. Water. I think we need to drink more water.
I think you really kind of hit the nail on the head there when you were talking about sugar added to beverages. When you go to the store and you pick up those bottles of kombucha, a lot of them do have some sugar added. How detrimental is added sugar in terms of gut health?
Well, we don't have great studies with regard to the microbiome, but keep in mind that anything that you put into your mouth and eat is going to change and alter your gut microbiome. And the question is it going to make it healthier? Or is it going to make it less healthy? And what we see, there's a general theme, Chuck, that's so simple, yet so important, which is the harder that a food is for you to digest, the better it is for your gut microbiome. And there is nothing easier to digest than sugar. It is not good for your gut microbiome. It is inflammatory.
Holly on Facebook writes, I have severe Crohn's disease. Can I get into long-term remission naturally?
Well, so obviously I can't give direct medical advice. So please don't listen to this and think that you're going to go and do this without your healthcare provider guiding the way. From my perspective with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, the way that I treat it is this. It's like having a forest fire out of control. In order for me to rebuild the forest, I need to put the fire out. From my perspective, to properly heal Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, I need to treat with medicine to get the disease under control, put my patient into remission, and then when my patient is in remission, I am moving them on to a plant-based diet, and we are going to work on restoring their gut microbiome. We are going to rebuild that forest, but you got to put the fire out before you rebuild the forest.
Ball on YouTube. What do you think of cooked beans or tofu for ulcerative colitis?
I think that they're wonderful. I think that they're wonderful. In fact, in chapter 3 of my book, I break down the process by which a person develops inflammatory bowel disease. And I lay out for you the exact steps that are involved in this development. You have to understand, Chuck, this is kind of crazy, but people think that inflammatory bowel disease like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease are autoimmune. They're not. They're not autoimmune. There's no antibody to your own body, okay? These conditions are your immune system reacting to your gut microbiome. And what that means is that if you can heal the microbiome, you can heal the process.
Abhishek on Facebook. What causes GERD? Is there a specific reason such as diet?
Well, there's no question that diet plays a role. We used to think that it was all obesity, but then we started seeing people who were skinny with acid reflux, and we realized, gosh, it's not all that. Then we thought it was all motility. Well, guess what? Now here we are in 2020, and we have discovered that it's actually a combination. It's the gut microbiome. And that's the reason why we have studies that show that, number one, you can improve acid reflux with fiber. Number two, you can improve acid reflux with a plant-predominant Mediterranean diet. And number three, the elimination of alcohol and caffeine and the replacement with water can actually improve acid reflux as well.
All right, Kenneth Starr on YouTube. This is one that I think a lot of people, especially when they're first transitioning over to a plant-based diet, wonder about. They write, I always feel bloated on a whole food plant-based diet. There's no way around it. I started adding, though, vinegars and chilies because it's really uncomfortable. Does that have anything to do with gut health?
So first of all, Ken Starr, I'm thankful for Ken Starr, the celebrity, to be asking me a question.
Kenneth Starr with an A.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So the answer to the question is that our diet does play a role. Our diet does play a role in the development of gas and bloating. And when you transition onto a plant-based diet, your gut microbiome needs an opportunity to adapt or adjust. And in my book, in chapter 5, I lay out the exact way to go about this process to heal your gut. And yes, it may take 4 to 6 weeks. It's kind of like rehab after you have an injury to a muscle. You got to get your muscle back. You go through the rehab process to get your muscle back. The gut is like a muscle too. You are not stuck with gas and bloating for the rest of your life. You have a gut that's adaptable. And by taking the proper approach, you will heal your gut and you will be able to enjoy these foods without restriction. And that's the way that I enjoy them. And I've taken care of countless patients with the same approach.
Stephanie from YouTube, how many varieties of plant foods should we strive to eat per week for diversity?
There is no restriction. There's no magic number. Okay. But the bottom line is this: in the study, which was the American Gut Project, it is the most powerful study to date to allow us to correlate diet and lifestyle to the health of our microbiome. And this is the study that came forward to show us the single greatest predictor of a healthy gut microbiome, more powerful than being vegan, is the diversity of plants in your diet. In that study, the number was 30. Don't stop at 30. Keep going. My friend Simon Hale from Plant Proof challenges you to go to 40. For me, why stop there? Keep going. Go as high as you can.
All right, Inez from YouTube. What does Dr. B think about home fermenting? Should we try to make those foods with as little salt as possible?
Well, that is a great question. So first of all, I am a huge fan of home fermenting. I actually have an entire chapter in my book where we talk about how to make your own sauerkraut, talk about other fermented foods. And of course, the foods that I recommend are the ones that are plants. So, but the question is a good one. The salt is not required for fermentation. You could create sauerkraut without salt at all. It's a part of the flavor. And so from my perspective, there is no need to overwhelm your body with salt. You should use the lowest amount of salt necessary to create a flavor profile that you really enjoy.
Stebri for fun on YouTube. Are avocado oil and olive oil detrimental to gut health? I don't eat them, but trying to feed a very hungry teenager.
Well, so the issue is this. oil, if you look at the number of calories in oil, okay, 1 pound of oil has 4,000 calories. 1 pound of greens has 100 calories. We're talking about 40 times more calories ounce per ounce compared to greens, compared to many other plant foods. And so this is not good from a calorie to nutrient perspective. The fiber content of oil is 0. So you can't look at oil and say, I need more of that. It's not healing the gut microbiome. The less that you have in your diet, the better off you'll be.
I love that answer because so many times on the show, I've talked with other people who have lost weight, whether they've done it through a plant-based diet or they're like me and they're using the plant-based diet to keep it off long term. We always point to the caloric density and the fat density. And it's like, man, I can eat like a whole pound of mangoes and that won't even sniff, those 2 tablespoons of peanut butter that I would smear on top of a bagel every morning and then follow that up with, fried whatever. And it's just, you get so much more. You just get so much more bang for your buck. And from what you've been saying, because of the fiber then in that mango or the fruit or whatever the healthier food might be, that's going to fuel your gut to health as well.
Absolutely, Chuck. This is why when you eat that mango, you feel light, even though you're eating, substantially more from a weight perspective. You still feel lighter and you feel energized and you're able to carry on throughout your day without restriction. Whereas those 2 tablespoons of oil, you're going to pay the price, right? It might taste great for about 3 minutes, and then the hangover kicks in, and then you need a cup of coffee or a Red Bull to get you through the rest of the day.
That oil hangover, that's the worst. Mac on Facebook, is there a direct association between microbiome and the development of Alzheimer's disease?
So there are connections, there are associations. The question that comes up is whether or not the association is actually causation. This is one of the challenges that we have in many of our microbiome studies. But what I will tell you is this. One of the amazing things that I discovered as I was researching my book was the power of short-chain fatty acids extend so far beyond the gut. It is insane. Short-chain fatty acids, which again, you get from the consumption of dietary fiber, being released from your gut microbes, they will leave the gut. They will travel throughout the body, to the heart, to the lungs. And yes, they will cross the blood-brain barrier. And we have shown studies that they will actually prevent the formation of beta amyloid plaques. Chuck, do you realize how much the pharmaceutical industry would pay for a pill that prevents the formation of beta amyloid plaques? They would pay billions of dollars. And guess what? You don't need the pill. You just need to eat plants. The fiber will do it for you. Thank you very much.
All right, time for a couple more questions. So keep them coming in that comment box right now. This next one comes to us from Darren. What are your thoughts on all forms of yeast, conventional, wild, etc., in products such as bread that tout being healthy for digestive issues?
Our gut microbiome is made up of 5 different types of microorganisms. That includes predominantly bacteria, but it also includes yeast, archaea, protozoa, and viruses. And they live in harmony and balance. And yes, yeasts are part of harmony and balance. There are healthy ones and there are unhealthy ones. And the yeast that we find that help us to make sourdough, for example, are healthy yeasts. And they're also, frankly, destroyed during the baking process. They're inactivated. So you don't need to worry necessarily about that unless you're actually consuming the raw dough. But nonetheless, the point is that not all yeasts should be vilified, and certainly not all bacteria should be vilified either. Most of them are actually our friends, and they're trying to heal us.
I think the people watching are, well, what about nooch? I've got so much of it in my kitchen. What about nutritional yeast? Good to go?
Yeah, I love it.
All right, question from Susanna on YouTube. Is brown sugar also damaging to the cells, or is it just white sugar? Should I be using agave?
So it comes back to this idea that the more processed, the simpler it is to absorb, the less good it is for our microbiome. So brown sugar is not significantly different on the spectrum compared to white sugar. It's a slight variation. You can't, Is it a step up? Yes. This is kind of like the studies, Chuck, where they say, oh my gosh, butter is back. Butter is so good for people. It's like, well, that's because you compared butter to trans fat, which is literally the least healthy sewage on the entire planet. And so in nutrition, it's all about substitutions, and you certainly don't want more brown sugar in your life. When it comes to sweeteners, if the question is what sort of sweeteners, I really try to minimize to the best of my ability, but I do think that a little bit of stevia, a little bit of erythritol, a little bit of monk fruit are within reason.
All right, Joe Tinder, kind of a follow-up on what it was that we were talking about earlier. This Joe Tinder from YouTube, is peanut butter and plant-based butters and cheese good on a vegan diet?
Well, you can't say that they're good. I mean, these are high fat, high calorie, low nutrient foods. And we're trying to recreate the flavor profiles. And I understand why some people who are transitioning feel the desire to do that. But that's not something that is the foundation of a healthy gut microbiome. The foundation of a healthy gut microbiome are the real things, the things that you could grow in your yard if you had a garden.
All right. And just a couple more here. Ian on Facebook. Does Dr. B have prebiotics at breakfast?
100% oats. Oats are incredible. Oats contain beta-glucan, which, by the way, beta-glucan is also found in mushrooms and incredibly good for the immune system. Incredibly good. This morning, I am a huge fan of smoothie bowls. My wife makes a killer morning smoothie. If you check out my Instagram account, you're going to see a lot of pictures of a blue smoothie. That's from the blueberries, but it also has broccoli sprouts. It has banana. It has greens in it. Incredibly healthy. And then what we'll do is we'll get a little bit of extra stuff in there. So we'll throw some berries on top. We'll throw some nice granola on top. And it makes for a delicious morning meal with lots of plant-based diversity.
That sounds amazing. And I could use one for lunch, as a matter of fact. I don't even care that it's not even breakfast anymore. Just bring it on.
Breakfast, lunch, or dinner is the best, man.
A lot of people are really curious about the sweetener thing. Everybody's got a sweet tooth. So Duncan on YouTube, many vegan cookbooks call for maple syrup. Is that bad?
No, I mean, I think maple. So my book does have some recipes that include maple syrup. Sorry, I'm not really good at. There we go. There it is. My book does have some recipes that include maple syrup, and I think that the bottom line is this: we certainly don't want to be maximizing the amount of sugar that we get from sweeteners. That includes maple syrup. Okay, that includes molasses. But from my perspective, we really want to minimize those. If you have a sweet tooth, which I do, I will readily admit that, a bowl of berries goes a long way. And that to me is the best way to curb that sweet tooth.
All right. And George, is psyllium good to counter IBS?
So psyllium is an example of a prebiotic fiber. There's a number of different choices. I have an entire chapter in my book entitled Prebiotics, Probiotics, and Postbiotics. If you've never heard of postbiotics, you have to read my book. It is the game changer. That's where the money really is at. And from my perspective with psyllium, if you like the psyllium, by all means, but don't forget, diet and lifestyle always come first.
All right. Last question comes to us from Ralston on YouTube. And this is a big one for a lot of people in the morning, maybe with their smoothie bowls. Is black coffee bad for the microbiome?
So let me first come clean with my bias. Okay. When I have bias, I will readily admit it. I love coffee. Any study that tells me that coffee is good for you, I automatically am like, that's a great study. I don't care if it was published in the, Cook County Journal of Medicine. I don't care. But the point is this: black coffee actually is a rich source of both antioxidants and prebiotics. It has prebiotic polyphenols. So from my perspective, consumed in moderation, black coffee is actually very good for the gut microbiome. And the other thing that's actually incredibly good for the gut microbiome is tea, both black tea and green tea. My personal favorite is matcha green tea. It has a ton of EGCG, which is prebiotic. It's a polyphenol. It has antioxidant properties, and it's wonderful.
You ever put the toasted rice in there with your green tea, man? That is heaven on earth.
I've never done that. You're going to have to teach me how to do this.
Oh, well, you get the pan out, you just dry toast the rice in the pan, and then you take a few grains and you put that in there with the tea, and then you enjoy, my friend. And it's as simple as that. It is mind-blowingly good. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you've tried the toasted rice green tea, go ahead and let us know in the comment box, because I cannot be the only one that's on board with this. Matter of fact, our producer Emily, I know she loves this. She brought in a whole jar of toasted rice just so she could put it in her tea at work. It's phenomenal tasting.
I'm trying to blow minds with my book, and you're blowing my mind right here live on the air. What am I supposed to do?
Well, I think that you just need to include toasted rice tea in your next book. How about that?
I'm going to have to release an addendum to this book. I got to call my publisher as soon as we get done here.
All right. And your new book, Fiber Fueled, is out tomorrow. So head over to Amazon or your favorite online book retailer to order your copy now. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, Gut Health MD, my friend, it has been an absolute slice of heaven having you here.
Chuck, thank you so much. And I wish that we could have talked about Otis from the WWE. Maybe we'll get to that next time.
Yeah, you had to go there. You are the man. Dr. B, congratulations on the book, man. Nothing but continued success. Look forward to having you on again in the near future.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. And one of the questions that we also get most here on the exam room is, where can I go to find a good plant-based doctor or nutritionist? Well, exciting news. Have no fear, because the Barnard Medical Center is here. You can schedule an appointment and take charge of your health without ever leaving the comfort of your own home. We are talking about 21st century house calls, virtual medicine, telehealth. Visit barnardmedical.org or call 202-527-7500. That is 202-527-7500 or barnardmedical.org to make your appointment now. You see this fine group. So many of these doctors and dietitians have been on the show with us. Lee Crosby, dietitian extraordinaire, she will be on the program tomorrow. She can consult with you, get your diet on the right track, help even get your gut microbiome in check, I guarantee. So new patients right now being accepted if you live in California or New York or Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Missouri, Arizona, Colorado, Massachusetts, and now Kentucky as well. If you live in any one of those locations and more soon, you can head over to barnardmedical.org and schedule your appointment today. And that is all the time that we have for today. Tomorrow on the show, again, the Fiber Queen. We go from the Gut Health MD, Mr. Fiber Fueled, to the Fiber Queen. Lee Crosby will be here tomorrow. We're going to talk all about heart-healthy foods, the red foods for your heart that you should be eating to keep your heart in great shape. And why is that important right now? Because it's like what Dr. Barnard and I were talking about at the top of the show. Heart disease, one of the leading underlying conditions to elevate COVID-19 risks. So let's get your heart in shape. Let's get you in shape. And we're going to do it with red foods and dietitian extraordinaire, Lee Crosby. So that is tomorrow, noon Eastern, right back here on the Exam Room Live. But until then, for Dr. Neal Barnard and Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, Dr. B, and for everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for taking some time out of your day to join us. And until tomorrow, eat something green and keep it clean. We'll talk to you then.